Sometimes as a sports channel, it's hard to find content to make during off-season, and other times, things like this just fall in your lap. As I'm sure y'all have heard by now, there's a potential scandal going on between Kawhi and a potential $28 million package. So, let's try and break it down. Pablo Torres, an investigative journalist, released over 3,400 pages regarding the issue as well as the aspiration interviews. However, the issue started far earlier. Back in 2021, over 4 years ago, Kawhi signed a 4-year, $176.3 million extension with the Clippers. This was the maximum salary cap that could be paid under the CBA. Less than a month later, Ballmer personally endorsed $50 million into the Aspiration brand. According to Ballmer himself, this is the same time that Ballmer introduced the brand to Kawhi in order to establish a relationship. Ballmer would later state that this was his only involvement and everything else was beyond him, and that any deal was between Kawhi and the brand, rather than Ballmer coercing them to work together. Less than 2 weeks later, Aspiration signed its $300 million sponsorship to the Clippers for its jersey patch and stadium deals. These things on their own seem unsuspicious. An owner invests money into a company, which could be as simple as them diversifying their financial portfolio. The owner investor sees a potential partnership with the team long term and introduces them to the star player as a way to sweeten the pot for the investment. By the end of November, another company, KL2 Aspire LLC, was registered, an LLC for Kawhi's investments and assets. Once again, this action is nothing that sticks out. Celebrities, athletes, and other high-profile people usually have these types of companies as a means of protection. That's exactly what LLC stands for, Limited Liability Company. Essentially, the company holds the rights that license the person's name, image, and likeness and signs endorsement contracts. Money from these deals goes through the business, and the business can handle taxes, hiring and firing managers, and so on. An LLC protects the player because then if a contract is breached or something else happens, the company rather than the person is who is on the contract. So a lawsuit goes through the company rather than the person it represents. This sets the puzzle pieces for us, which again on their own don't mean much. However, it's a few months later when things start to get a little suspicious. Per ESPN's summary of Torres' docs, Kawhi, via his LLC, agreed to $28 million over 4 years starting April 1st, 2022, roughly coming out to $7 million a year. By the CBA, any money personally from an owner to a player beyond the cap is prohibited, hence the cap. However, there are much looser rules on things like endorsements, hence why every player has them as extra revenue sourcing, commercials, shoes, performance metrics, and more. The specifics of this LLC to Aspiration contract are where things get a little sticky. To best explain the situation, we'll use it as a stoplight analogy. As stated before, players regularly get endorsements and paid externally for things like commercials or products or whatever the case is. This is the status quo, the green light. Now, with this green light, there can be a few asterisks with it, which is where things tread closer to the yellow on the stoplight. When players make deals, sometimes a campaign is contingent on them staying with that team. This makes a lot of sense for local brands especially. If a company is based in LA and advertising for LA, they might want a Laker or a Clipper to talk highly of it, while if that player is traded towards, say, the Celtics, they aren't as tied to LA and it doesn't benefit the brand as much, so they may void the contract or have the terms for the deal to end if the player ever leaves the team. There are several examples of this. Blake Griffin was promoting Flagstar Bank of Michigan as a Piston, Joakim Noah promoting Harris Bank, and even Kawhi himself back when he was a Spur with HEB. Once those players leave, the campaign dissolves as they are no longer tied to the city and the team. The Clippers, though, tend to do things a bit differently, as this isn't the first time a situation like the Kawhi deal has happened to them. In July of 2015, the Clippers were fined $250,000 by reportedly offering DeAndre Jordan a $200,000 2K Lexus deal on the condition that he re-signs his free agency contract with them. This is where we drift towards the red light. The main difference between the DeAndre Jordan deal and a deal like Blake Griffin with the Pistons is that the Flagstar Bank reached the deal with Blake Griffin independently when he was already on the team, and if Blake Griffin does not stay a Piston, it doesn't align with the idea of the campaign. While with the Clippers DeAndre deal, the Clippers are the ones that proposed the deal alongside Lexus. The deal would only begin on the conditions that he resigns. Because of the circumstances, this makes it more akin to sweetening the pot for the free agency contract with the team to tag on to the player contract rather than an independent deal. The NBA stated that as part of the CBA, quote, teams are not allowed to offer or arrange non-basketball compensation through sponsors or investors as part of contract talks, and that's exactly what they did. Rather than it being a normal deal with Lexus, instead, Lexus essentially became money laundering to the player. This is where things apply to Kawhi. In the contract, there was a provision that the contract would be voided if Kawhi left the Clippers. Once again, this on its own puts things in the yellow and not necessarily prohibited, but something the NBA and others may want to be on standby caution for, similar to other deals. However, the thing that drives this further into the red is the second provision. This is the next puzzle piece. Kawhi could, quote, decline to proceed with any action desired and still be paid. Essentially, this means exactly what it sounds like. If there was an event like a meet and greet and Kawhi refused to show up, he would still be paid. This is why you hear the term no-show job used with this issue. Combining that with the other provision and the puzzle pieces that were seemingly separated, then start to put them together to form a nastier picture. With that wording, it practically makes the contract state, stay on the Clippers and do nothing else, and we'll pay you, which is the reason the news story is the media frenzy that it is. So, where exactly does the investigation begin? It seems pretty cut and dry that this contract is kinda shady. Well, like with most legal issues, it comes down to the level of intent and level of involvement. If the deal was reached independently from the Clippers, it sort of exonerates them from any fallout and fault. As an alternative though, if you recall, Ballmer introduced Kawhi and Aspiration to each other. If Ballmer introduced the deal of this contract for more incentive to the brand, such as the arena sponsorship or Ballmer's $50 million investment, it's the same ideal as the DeAndre Jordan deal of the team introducing something to circumvent salary cap. On top of that, the investigation will look towards any further control that Ballmer may have had at Aspiration. If Ballmer's $50 million investment gave him any executive decisions or means to steer that deal through his shareholding of Aspiration, it still creates a conflict of interest even if he didn't come at it from the Clippers angle. Let's break this down a bit further. With agency and affiliation under the NBA's anti-circumvention rules, it's not enough that a weird endorsement existed. The league has to determine whether the team or team affiliate, quote, arranged, induced, or had an understanding that a third party would pay Kawhi because he signed with or stayed on the Clippers. Introductions are allowed. Arranging compensation is not. In this case, Ballmer says that he only made an introduction between Aspiration and Kawhi's camp and had no role in these deals' terms. The league will test that. If evidence shows that the club or Ballmer, in some capacity as the owner, steered the terms or tied the money to team status or leveraged from the arena sponsorship or the $50 million investment to push the deal through, it looks like team arranged compensation or cap circumvention. If Aspiration acted independently and the team didn't induce or arrange the payments, that goes the other way. A second question is whether Aspiration effectively qualifies as a team affiliate. The CBA's definition can include entities under an owner's control or common control. If the league finds Ballmer's stake of the company conferred influence or control, such as board authority, vetoes, or directive emails, the payments look even more like the team funds by proxy. Ballmer has publicly said that his stake in the company was small and he had no board seat, and he was conned by Aspiration's founders. Finally, the substance of the contract matters. Clauses reportedly letting Kawhi to decline with any action but still be paid, and voiding the deal if he left the Clippers, push the deal away from bona fide advertising, so the NBA will start to ask the following questions. Were there any actual real deliverables for this money? And was the $7 million a year sort of the market rate for this type of deal? If not, then it supports an intent to disguise it. So now let's end things off with the core question. Why should the NBA or you care? Well, ask yourself this. How is it that we know the ins and outs of these contracts? Why is it that Torres was able to release 3,400 documents related to this matter? Well, during the 2022 to 2023 season, Aspiration started to default in its deals. The Clippers say Aspiration defaulted in obligations, and the team ended the sponsorship during the season, while Post Summary quotes the same team statement. Later in March of this year, 2025, Aspiration filed for bankruptcy, and more importantly became the subject of several fraud lawsuits totaling $248 million for faking financial statuses and other fraud. This is the core of everything. Since the court is open to the public, that means that all records pertaining to the lawsuit had to be released and publicized. Since this was a company-wide lawsuit into fraud, that meant that all company transactions were also made public as a result. That's why and how we're just hearing about all of this now, almost 3 to 4 years later after the deal happened. The records revealed the debt the company had towards Kawhi's LLC and the provisions within the contract. This creates a larger conspiracy the NBA has to find the extent of and put a lid on quickly. If all of this became public due only to Aspiration's legal failures, the league has to imagine how many more instances of these things like this are happening that aren't known yet. How many more secret deals are out there that we don't know about? If this starts becoming a trend, the NBA would essentially crumble as a result, and that's no exaggeration. That's why salary caps and other contract rules and things like the CBA exist. Otherwise, the richest owners, teams, and markets can monopolize the best players and talent, and these actions are sneaky ways to circumvent those rules. The competition across the league would dissolve, leaving teams like the Lakers, Golden State, Boston, and the Knicks, the 4 biggest franchises, running everything. While the smaller markets that recently had victories, the Thunder, the Nuggets, the Bucks, and other teams that have been in contention, such as the Pacers, the Cavs, etc., all essentially become dead in the water. Imagine if all teams essentially became the Wizards or G Leaguers, while the Lakers were an all-star team. The viewership would grind to a near halt. Not only that, but other revenue streams would dry up as well. The NBA and sports have a large hold on the gambling market, and any disruption to it is taken with large action. This is a large reason why the NBA shut down Sam Hinkie in the process, because people could bet against the 76ers during the time. With the teams mentioned dominating the league with money, it creates an uneven balance in odds on who to bet on as well. The league would be stretched at the seams to suppress all different fires as a result, so the NBA will handle this problem seriously. For instance, back in 2000 when David Stern was still commissioner, they laid down the hammer on a similar issue. There was a conspiracy with Joe Smith and the Timberwolves, and when it was exposed, the NBA and David Stern voided Smith's contract, fined the Wolves $3.5 million, and stripped 5 first-round picks from the team. The owner Glenn Taylor and executive Kevin McHale were sanctioned. As a result, the Timberwolves were left with essentially nothing to build around Kevin Garnett on the team, leaving even larger ripples for the team and the league-wide. If the Clippers and Ballmer are at fault, it's expected that an example will be made similar to this. For now, though, that's the information we have. We'll have to wait until the NBA concludes its investigation to point the responsibility and the consequences therein. If deep pockets can buy around the CBA, the whole market begins to tilt in scales. Whatever the verdict, the rules will get tighter because they have to. You can call it clever, you can call it corrupt. What matters is competitive balance. The decision here won't just hit one team, it sets the price of bending the caps and the rules for everyone. The paper trail will be tracked. Emails, text, phone calls, and the truth will soon be revealed. Until then, we just have to wait. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I had some other videos planned, but since I haven't uploaded in a while, I decided to go ahead and put this shorter video together on more recent events. I hope you guys will stick around for my channel, like, subscribe, share the video around, all that if you enjoyed, as it really does help me out. Check out my other videos and the stuff that I'll be coming out with shortly. And thank you all for watching. I'll see you all in the next one. Peace out.